This is Alex, and welcome to Barely Braided, where we're taking a deep dive into foster care, adoption, and all things parenting, even the sticky stuff. Hello, welcome to episode 45. It's definitely 45. I know I get it wrong like 9 times out of 10, but I'm sure this time. This guest needs no introduction because he is no stranger to Barely Braided podcast. Welcome to Corey Taylor. Hey, Corey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So I want to give listeners just kind of a brief overview, just in case they're newer or they haven't had a chance to listen to your previous episode. Actually, can I let you introduce yourself and kind of give us like what we should know up until now?
Yeah, that's fine. I am from St. Louis, Missouri. I just turned 24 this year. I'm a single foster dad and now a single foster and adoptive dad as of this week. I've been fostering since August 2019, and I've had 5 kids in my home.
Awesome. Also, you like to crochet. Is that still a thing?
Yes. I don't do it as much right now because I'm also in college, so I don't have a lot of free time.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So the purpose of this episode is to kind of update everybody on what's going on in your life. And you've definitely had some big developments when it comes to the foster care and adoptive world. So the intention here is to just update everybody on your story and kind of let everybody, including myself, know what's happened since then.
All right.
Cool. Okay. But before that, the last episode we talked about crocheting and I just brought it up. I am so intrigued that this is one of your hobbies and I just need to know if you've made anything cool since the last time we talked.
I don't think I've made anything other than like hats and scarves. Last year for Christmas, I don't even remember when the last time we talked was.
I feel like it's been over a year.
Or was it last year?
No, it was last year.
Yeah, last year. So last year for Christmas, I made infinity scarves.
Oh, yeah.
For my former boss, for her and to give to other people and for her to keep for one for herself, they were like faux fur and you couldn't even tell they were crocheted. So those were pretty cool.
That is super cool. Do you have like a website or an Etsy shop? Like, can we buy these?
I've always wanted to. I just haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, you should. If you ever do, let me know. We'll post the link. I am all about Etsy shopping, shopping,
Right.
especially people who make their own goods and sell them. Etsy has been my thing the last year.
Yeah, I like Etsy too.
Super cool. Okay, so the other thing that we talked about the last time that's not really foster care or adoption related is your job in graphic design. And I know we talked about how like they were very flexible because you do need a flexible job in this world. So are you still doing that?
I am not doing that anymore. I left that job right before Christmas last year. And now I work as a paraprofessional teacher aide at the high school here in town.
Oh my goodness. Lots of changes for you.
Yeah. So I'm doing that and I'm in college to become a full-time special ed teacher.
Oh my goodness. That is so super cool. So tell us about your job now, because I'm not like super familiar with the whole world of teaching other than like being a student myself. My kids aren't school aged yet.
Right. So my job right now is I'm a one-on-one paraprofessional. So I have one student that I walk his schedule with, and he has autism, and I just kind of help him get through his day, help accommodate his assignments and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of other types of paraprofessionals that I work with. There's classroom assistants, and then there's people that go around with groups of kids, and so lots of different variety there.
Super cool. Okay. So then in the last episode, you had your second foster placement.
Yeah.
I can't remember how old would he have been at that time?
He was either 5 or 6 when we did the last. He turned 6 right after he moved in with me, so he might have already been 6 at that point.
Okay, got it. So what has happened since then?
So when he came to live with me, that was like an adoptive placement. So I knew from day one that we would be working towards adoption. It took 18 months maybe a little bit over that before we reached adoption, but we have finally reached adoption, so that's super exciting.
Yeah, you had an adoption day. That
Yeah.
is super cool. It's rare that we talk to people on the podcast that have already had an adoption day. So I'm really interested to see, like, do you mind sharing how that process all worked and like the timelines and what each step was?
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
let's see. We started the process probably last summer, so like around June or July of 2020, and
Okay.
kind of just did all this paperwork, which I don't even remember what all the paperwork entailed. It was like a packet that I did on my own in my free time, and then faxed it to his caseworker.
Was the packet, it was like specific to an upcoming adoption, right?
It
Okay.
like asked, I had to pick like godparents for him. I had to tell every community activity that we're involved in, where he went to school, where he was going to go to school, babysitters that I would use, what daycare he would go to if I ever needed one, all kinds of like, it basically like plan his life out
Oh my
until he
goodness.
reaches 18.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And it was a lot of like trying to think of stuff that I normally don't think about, like things I wouldn't normally use. I had to get all this information, addresses of people and phone numbers and names.
Okay. So at this point, had the parents' rights been terminated or surrendered?
Yeah, their rights were surrendered before he moved in with me.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Okay. So then let me ask you this because I feel like we have not ever encountered a scenario where we had a foster placement or knew somebody who had a foster placement who was already had a termination or a surrender. So my thought is, why did it take 18 months then?
Oh, there's a lot of things that happened in the 18 months between the process starting and us adopting. So one thing was COVID. So we had a judge who got COVID, and that
Oh,
kind of
geez.
pushed things back a little bit because they plan these court dates like 3 to 6 months in advance. So if you miss one, you have to wait until the next one. There's no like, we'll just do it tomorrow or anything.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I had two DCFS hotline calls, which
What
was
does that mean?
um, So his daycare called twice on me about suspected child abuse, and it was unfounded. And
Oh,
I ended up
no.
the investigator ended up telling me the second time to pull him from that daycare because she knew it was just going to keep happening because they
Yeah.
were doing it. They were lying on their calls, and so the first time it happened, it was a different investigator. The first time and the second time, the first time she kind of asked some questions, and then he came home, and I was freaking out because I was like, this has
Yeah.
never happened to me. Just really, really, really nervous about what was coming
Yes.
next. And then the second time it happened, I was a little less nervous because I knew that there was the first time he had a goose egg on the back of his head. He had fallen out of bed. The second time he
Yeah.
was fine. I sent him to school, and to take care, and he was completely fine. So I was like, what is going on this time? And so after the investigator, she called me on the way there, and then when she had left, she called me again, and she said that it was completely unfounded. He had a bruise on his hand.
Oh my goodness. Wait. So why would the daycare, like, what is their motivation to do this? Are they just nosy or what's going on there?
Yeah, I never figured out who it was at the age or at the daycare place that called or anything, because that's confidential. But she did tell me that she suspected that they were just going to keep doing it because they just didn't see that how I could be a fit parent as a single dad who was 23 at the time.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That's awful.
So it didn't really have the only repercussion it really had was every time you have an open investigation, your adoption stops for a certain number of days, and I
Yeah.
don't remember exactly how many, but it's a lot of days. And so that pushed it back a few months. That since
Okay.
since it happened twice.
That is so terrifying to me because I will tell you, my children, like, there's probably not a day that goes by that one of them doesn't have like some sort of bruise or bump or something from
Right.
whatever the heck they did. Like, it's pretty constant with, feel like that's kind of normal.
Yeah. Especially for him, he has ADHD, and is just all over the place all the time, jumping off of things. And they know that. They knew that
Yeah.
that's the kind of kid that he was, and so it was just kind of irritating to know that they were calling me or calling on me because of that, when he has bruises all up and down his arms and legs. When he comes home from daycare in the afternoons, there's new bruises on him. So yeah,
Man,
that was
I
frustrating.
hate I hate that. Yeah, that's really irritating. We also have a similar daycare story, and I really wish I could share it right now, but I'm going to wait until after our foster daughter Ari's case is done. Like
Right.
whether that's adoption or whatever. I just feel like it's best to wait to share that story. Okay. So these unfounded complaints came in, you were cleared. Can I ask you, like, how was the process to clearing you? Did they just basically talk to you and talk to him and that's the end of it?
They talked to him. So the first time, I'll just go through everything that happened. So he fell out of bed that morning, or in the middle of the night, or whatever, and he had
Mhm.
this goose egg. He had a doctor's appointment anyway. So I brought him to daycare and I said, "Hey, he fell out of bed last night. He has a giant goose egg on the back of his head, and I'm taking him to the doctor today. But just keep an eye on him because I don't know if he has a concussion or anything. If you could just make
Yeah.
sure that he's not like all over the place." And so I let them know before anything happened.
Yeah.
They ended up calling on me during the day at some point. And so when I picked him up that night at 6, there was an investigator waiting for me. And at that point, the daycare had asked him so many times that he was like frustrated about what happened, and he was starting to make things up. So
Oh
when the
my gosh.
DCFS investigator got there and was being asked for who knows how many times, he just continued to make things up. And so she told me what he had said and how he had blamed me for it. And I explained to her that is not what happened. He fell out of bed. He was asleep. When I picked him up, he was freaking out. I calmed him back down and he went back to sleep. That's it. But I ended up having to take him to the doctor. I was going to take him to the doctor anyway, but then I had to end up taking him sooner. I think that afternoon. I don't remember. So that she could check him out. She had to like
Wow.
fully check him out, make sure there were no bruises anywhere else on his body.
That is nuts. I mean, I definitely understand that they want to take those complaints seriously and do
Right.
their due diligence. But at the same time, you think of those stories you hear where like police detectives interrogate somebody so much that their story changes and they
Yeah.
start to say things that aren't in fact true. And,
Right.
that's happened. That's been proven as a tactic that
Mm-hmm.
investigators use.
Yeah. So when he got in the car with me that afternoon, he told me that he had told a lie. And when I asked him why, he said, because when I said I don't know, they kept asking me. So I made
Oh my
something up.
goodness. Wow. Yeah, because he wanted them to be satisfied and be done.
Right. And because
Oh my
he was getting
goodness.
pulled out from playing with his friends and doing all the other activities. And he said he had just had enough. He was not going to answer anymore. He didn't want to answer it anymore. So he was going to make something up so they would stop asking. And I told the
Wow.
investigator that he had said that too.
And it shows
Um,
how comfortable he is with you too. I mean, first of all, poor little guy for having to deal with that at all, and
right.
for you as well. But it says a lot that he's willing to come to you and say, "Hey, I told a lie." I mean, because I feel like a lot of kids his age, like they're not going to be freely throwing out that information like, "Hey,
Right.
I lied today."
Yeah. And then so the
Wow.
second time it happened, it was a different investigator, and she actually called me so that I wasn't blindsided when I showed up, which I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Because the first time I was blindsided. So she called me. She let me know that there was a call that she was going to investigate, and that she would call me back when she was done. When she called me back, she told me that she was very honest with me, and she said this was the most ridiculous hotline call I've ever received. And she said she fully expected to have to take him to the emergency room. And when she got there, there was almost nothing wrong with him. He had a
Oh
bruise
my
on his right
gosh.
hand that was probably the size of his thumb.
Oh my goodness.
Not something that an adult could do, or I guess like an adult could do it, but it wasn't really a sign of abuse.
Right.
But it was the size of like his thumbprint on his right hand. And then he had dark circles under his eyes. And they said that he had 2 black eyes.
Oh my gosh.
So she said, that's just his skin color. And so she still had to go through with the investigation. So once it's open, you still have all these steps you have to take. So I had to take him back to the doctor and get him checked out again. And then she had to come to our house and make sure that everything was safe here and then interview him separately. but that one was really quick and easy. She just kind of sat at our kitchen table for a while and kind of observed what happens in our house. But yeah, so it wasn't too bad.
That's absolutely nuts. Okay, well, I'm very sorry that both of you had to go through that. And I mean, I'm glad now. It seems to me we've never been through an adoption through foster care, but it seems to me like adoption day is the day that you can stop dealing with like some of this red tape kind of
Right.
stuff.
And one thing that people are more likely to call DCFS on foster parents than they are on biological parents.
Really?
Yeah. So it's, yeah, if they have anything, they're waiting for something to happen, which doesn't make any sense because foster parents are trained, and also there's caseworkers in their house 1 to 3 times a month. So it doesn't really make sense to be hyperactive in that and like that observant over little tiny things, but people just are. And so it's not uncommon for foster parents to be hotlined over minor things that other kids would not, or other parents would not be hotlined over.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that foster parents, I mean, I'm assuming it's the same there as it is here, but foster parents have to have background checks and, like you said, caseworker visits, foster parent support worker visits, home checks, all of it. And
Yeah.
most biological parents don't have to deal with any of that or even think about any of that.
Right.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. So everything was delayed for months and months and months. And all of a sudden, you were given an adoption day, right?
Yes. I had less than 24 hours to prepare.
What? So they gave
Yeah.
you your adoption day like the next day or a couple days later?
Yeah. So I got a text probably a week before they scheduled it that said everything's from the caseworker. She said everything's done. We just have to wait for the court to schedule it. But the court that his case was originally out of, the other side of the state, they had given a deadline of November 22nd. So I was thinking, they're going to schedule closer to the end of that time frame just to give them some time. So I got a call on November 2nd, I think it was. Yeah, he was adopted November 3rd. So on November 2nd at like 12:30, my attorney called me, or his attorney called me and said, the adoption is tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Oh my goodness.
And thankfully, I had the option to do it in person or over Zoom because I had all these people that wanted to see it. So if I had gone with the in-person route, first of all, I would have to call off work in less than 24 hours notice. And then also almost none of my family would have been able to be part of it.
So, okay, you said there was a deadline of November 22nd. Who issued the deadline?
So we had 2 courts communicating back and forth in this case. So he was originally from a different county than the one we live in.
Oh.
So because it was like 2 hours away. Usually you would just go to that court to do your adoption, but because it was so far away, they allowed us to do it here in our county.
Okay.
But the courts had to communicate back and forth, and they were still a part. Both courts were still a part of the planning of the adoption. And so his original court made the deadline of November 22nd.
Okay, I see. I had never heard that a deadline existed, but I really like that idea. I feel like I wish that was more of a thing. Okay, so you sit down on the Zoom, you log in, here comes the judge on video. I don't know if that's how it happened there, but that's how it happens here. So how did that go? Like, what was there a program of events?
No, first of all, the judge did not know that it was an adoption hearing, which I thought was pretty interesting. She got on there and all my family was there, and she's like, this is a lot of people for, I don't know what kind of hearing.
For somebody's going to jail.
Right. And she was like, and the attorney was like, oh, we switched it from that hearing to an adoption hearing. And she's like, oh, I don't think I have paperwork for that. She's like, I just emailed it to you 10 minutes ago.
Are you freaking out at that point?
Yeah, I'm like, wow, are we going to have to reschedule this?
Yeah.
But she got the email, she looked at it, and she's like, okay, let's go forward with it. And I swore in as the witness. The attorney asked me a series of questions about how long he had lived with me, why he came to live with me, if it was foster care or otherwise, if I loved him, if I knew that this was permanent.
Oh
And
my goodness. I didn't
I think
realize they
that's,
asked questions like that.
yeah, I think that's it. And then the judge, the judge, oh no, then the guardian ad litem, he had to speak, and he said that he had nothing to add, real short and sweet. And then the judge said, all right, he's adopted. The whole
Whoa.
thing
Did
took
the
3 minutes and
judge?
40 seconds.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Did she like stomp her gavel thing?
Nope.
Oh man, I would have asked for that. So, okay, you said that the guardian ad litem was there. So I'm assuming, I guess that's the person who like coordinated the whole thing and got together all the paperwork and did the submitting to
No.
the judge. Is that right? Okay. No.
So the adoption attorney is the one that does all that. The guardian ad litem is the person that advocates for the best interest of the child.
That's what I was wondering. Okay. So
Yeah.
the adoption attorney was somebody different. And is that
Right.
somebody who you had chosen to hire?
Yes. I picked the adoption attorney.
Okay. Okay. Can I ask you a personal question, which is, did the state pay for the adoption attorney?
Yep. Paid for.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't pay
Cool. Yeah, that
anything.
all sounds similar. That all sounds really similar to, I think, how it happens here. Wow. Okay. So did he say anything
Nope, they
during
didn't
the
ask him.
court? They didn't?
No. I
I
had
feel
told
like
him, I
they
was like,
should
I
ask
think they're going
him.
to ask you some questions, but I'm not entirely sure. And he was real nervous about it. They ended up not
Oh.
asking him anything.
I wonder maybe if there's like an age limit, because I feel like it is customary to ask older children, like,
Yeah, I
do
think
you
maybe
want
like
to
around
be?
somewhere between 8 and 12, maybe they start asking those questions.
Yeah. Or like, I wonder what would have happened. Like, let's say he was just like having a tantrum or having a really bad day or
Right.
like screaming or something. Like, what do you think they would have done?
I don't know. I was thinking that they were going to ask him at least the question of, do you want to be adopted? But
Right?
I don't know.
Oh, that's so crazy. So, did you change his name? You don't
Yep.
have to tell us what it is or anything, but
Yeah. So me and my dad and my grandpa have the same middle name. So I gave him our same middle name and then
oh,
changed his
nice.
last name.
Super cool. And then he kept his first name.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. So, after the adoption was over, like what happened? Did you guys hang up the call and look at each other like what the heck is going on now?
Yeah. We hung up and then he hugged me and then I was like, all right, it's time to go back to school. We were sitting in the school parking lot. So he ran back in and went back to his class and told everyone he was adopted.
Oh, that is so cute. So, I apologize for like jumping around and going back and forth, but this is just too cute. Did you have any conversations with him? I'm assuming you probably did before the adoption about like what this really means. Like it's a forever
Yeah.
thing.
We had talked about it a lot from the very beginning. I think I started having conversations with him about it in June of last year because I wanted to
Oh,
give him
wow.
some time.
Yeah.
Because he had left an adoptive home. And so I wanted to give him some space about that because he was
Mm-hmm.
grieving the loss of that family. And then after a while, I started talking to him about what a dad is because he was still calling me by my first name at that point. And I didn't
Ah,
ask him to call me anything different. I was just asking him questions about what he thought a dad was because he never really had, before foster care, didn't really have a father figure who was his dad. So he never really called anybody dad.
okay.
He had a stepdad that was in the home, and then he had foster dads afterwards. But he had never called somebody dad.
Okay.
So we started having conversations about that. And then shortly after, he started calling me dad.
Oh, wow. Do you remember the first time he called you dad?
Yeah. Yeah. It was last year around my birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that was
How
really
did
weird because it was the first time anyone had ever called me that.
Oh my goodness. That's such a cool moment though. You'll
Yeah,
never
it
forget
is.
that.
Yeah.
Never. So now is it just kind of like roll off his tongue? Don't even think
Yep.
about it?
Every once in a while, he'll call me Corey because my other foster son calls me Corey. And so he like
Yeah.
tries to get away with it. I was like, nope, that ship has sailed. You don't get to call me that anymore.
No more. So your other foster child, what's going on with that?
So he's only with us on the weekends. That he's actually my first foster child, and he's back on
Oh.
weekends. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So where does
So
he
he's had
go the rest of the
a
time?
long and rough journey, but he's back for right now. So
Does he do his bio family during the week or how's that
no,
working?
he's in a group home.
Gotcha. Okay. So I didn't realize they had setups where there would be like group home sometimes and foster home sometimes.
Yeah, it's just like an optional thing. So I said I had known that he was in this group home for a long time, and I had given him some space to process things, and he's doing therapy and stuff. And then eventually, I was like, okay, I want to step back into his life and try to be like a consistent person for him. And so they said that we could do overnight weekends, and so we've been doing that since August or September.
Okay, super cool. So, what do you have any idea like what his future looks like?
Eventually, he'll come stay here full time.
Gotcha.
But
Okay.
he's in a different school district, and it's the middle of the school year, so we're just trying to figure that
Oh,
kind of stuff out.
you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but if the option for adoption comes up for him, are you open to that?
Yeah, he's actually on the Adopt US Kids website, so that's what brought me back to him.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? So, what happens then if another family gets on there and says, "No, no, no, we want to meet him and hang out with him"? Would you be like kind of
Because I'm a
territorial?
former foster parent, I already have first pick. I don't know. I don't want to
Yeah.
say it insensitively, but since he's already lived here and we already have a relationship, they'll just say that that's not available right now.
Oh, that's
But
great.
yeah,
Do they
he's
get
up on
along?
there. Yeah,
They
they
get
get
along.
along.
The boys do?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Oh my goodness. So much has changed. I'm like trying to keep up with it all.
Yeah, a lot has changed. I'm trying to keep up with it all
I
myself.
bet.
New job, school, kids, adoption. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on. So if they call you tomorrow and say, "Hey, we've got a 2-month old, can you come pick him up?" Would you say, "Yeah, nah, sorry, not right now"?
Yeah, I can't do that. I would really. They still call me sometimes and ask me, and I'm like, you really have to stop calling me because every time I want to say yes, but I have a 2-bedroom house and I have 2 kids already occupying that bedroom, so there's not really any space here for another kid.
So let's say hypothetically, I don't want to say the second child, but since we don't use names, I'm going to say the second child. Let's say like you do adopt him. Will you probably then close your home, call it good?
No, I don't think I'll close my license. I'll wait, maybe do respite for a while, just weekend stuff, and then eventually move to a bigger house when
Gotcha.
I finish
Gotcha.
college,
Okay.
and then continue. I don't want to stop yet, so
So as a single foster dad, I mean, obviously you're so busy and there are so many obligations when it comes to foster care and adoption. Do you have any tips for people just kind of like keeping it together and keeping their lives running smoothly without letting things fall through the cracks?
I would definitely get involved somewhere where you meet other foster families. So I go to a church where there's a lot of foster families.
Yeah.
Um, and so, because it's so hard, I previously went to a church where I was the only foster family. And while I loved the people my friends there, none of them understood what I was going through. And there was no support.
Mm,
And the support that they did give it wasn't helpful. And I hate to say that because I know they're doing their best,
right.
but it's just not helpful if they don't know what you're going through. So I would find people who know what you're going through for sure. And then because they know what you're going through, it's a lot easier to ask for help, because they're going to ask you for help too. So I would just not be afraid to ask for help, and then not be afraid to say no sometimes to things. Right? I struggle with that a lot because I don't say no to much. So my weeks are pretty busy right now, even though I have a lot on my
Yes.
plate. But I do know when I can't do something that I have the freedom to say no and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, that's something I'm kind of recently learning too. And so not only saying no, but also sometimes if you do, people will not respect your boundaries.
Right.
They won't be okay with it. Like I've had to say no to like certain plans or certain invitations or whatever. And I have had people like not understand, say things like, "Oh, you only get one chance to live. Why are you just staying home?" and or whatever. Sometimes people won't respect your boundaries, which is
Yeah.
kind of annoying. What would you go back and tell yourself like a year ago or a year and a half ago if you could?
I would give
Anything?
myself every resource that I've read in the 2 years that I've been a foster parent and say, read
You
this
would.
now before you start. Because every
So
time I
like
read a new book or
books.
go through a new training, I'm like, okay, now everything that I've done the past 3 months is wrong, and now I can't go back and change that. Um,
Yeah.
so I would definitely like give myself all the resources I have now.
Do you have any favorite books?
My favorite is The Connected Child, and I
Yeah.
can give that book to other people to help them understand my own kids. There's one chapter in there that I can share with teachers and family members and friends who just don't understand what my kids are doing. So I would say that one's probably my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel like that's kind of like one of the Bibles of foster care adoption, The
Yeah.
Connected
Oh, and I'll
Child.
say that chapter 4, if anyone out there doesn't know, it's chapter 4. You can actually get it for free online because it's such a good chapter to share with other people.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. That's great. I also have like 6 copies of that book too that I
Yeah.
picked up in various places. So if anybody needs one, hit me up.
One thing that I've done with kids, well, I guess I've only done it once, maybe twice, with kids that have left my home, is I get a copy of the book for their new home, and I fill it out with notes for the family that are specific to the child that they're getting,
Oh, wow.
like
That's
things that
really
work and things that
helpful.
don't work, and that I hope that's helped.
I'm sure it absolutely has. So between the last time we spoke and now, have you had other placements as well?
I've had 2 respite placements that were with us for less than a week. And then I've
Okay.
had one long-term placement that I had for a month, and it was supposed to be for 2 weeks.
Oh.
So it was another 7-year-old. And it was, well, my son was still 6, and then he was already 7. They were only 3 months apart in age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so one thing that happened was the other boy was always the youngest in his family, and suddenly he wasn't, and he was going to take advantage of that. And so he was very condescending to my son, which is, I mean, they're young, they don't really understand it like that. But it was really hard to let him know that they both knew the same amount of information, and oftentimes his information was completely misinformed, and so that caused a lot of arguments and fights in between the 2 kids. And then also his trauma history and the way he reacted to it was not safe for another
Oh.
kid the same size, smaller than him in the home. So he would act out aggressively, and it was starting to
Okay.
have effects on my son. So we ended up.
Yeah, that's a
I had to
delicate
I
thing.
told the caseworker. I tried to do it the nicest way possible, and I was like, "This was supposed to be for 2 weeks, but I can go a little bit longer if you're still looking for a home for him, because I don't want this to happen again. I don't want you to find a home that's just the first person to say yes because you've badgered them into it, and then for him to have to
Right.
move again. So I want it to be the right place, but it needs to be fast."
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of feet dragging and excuses, and it just kept going on and on and on, and eventually I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's not healthy for him, and it's not healthy for my son, and it's not healthy for me to keep living like this. We were all 3 miserable. It was just not a good
Yeah.
fit. I didn't feel connected to him no matter how hard I tried. I never would have thought that I would ever say that about a child that entered my home in foster care. I was thought that, they come in and then you treat them like your own, and then you feel like they're your own. And that was how it worked up to that point. And then suddenly I have a kid in my home who I try to do everything that I've always done, and I just didn't feel connected to him, which is really a
Well,
really weird feeling that no one ever prepared me for.
yes, but also good on you for recognizing that
Right.
and for making the changes necessary in the best interest of everybody in the home and kind of like handling it in that proper and tactful way. And then talking about it, because when it happens to somebody else, they're going to feel like, hey, I'm not the only one that this happened to.
Right.
There's a best way to handle it. And, hopefully, in, like I said before, the most tactful way, just to keep everybody in the best headspace as possible.
It was a good reminder that it's not always meant to be,
Right.
and it was a way to tell me in that moment that this is not where he belongs.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't where he needs to be. This isn't where he's going to be healthy and happy for the rest of his life. Because it was supposed to be for 2 weeks, and then she was starting to mention adoption to me, and I was like, that's not what I signed up for. I'm already in the process of one adoption, and I can't say yes to an adoption with less than a month of him living here. That's unfair. for both of us. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
just like that feeling I feel like was given to me so that I knew that I had to push for him to go somewhere else. And
Mm-hmm.
now he's in an adoptive home, and I still have contact with that family. So that's been pretty great.
Yeah, that is great. I was going to ask that because I feel like a lot of times when a child moves, you kind of have no idea where they went or what happened to them, and you
Yeah.
hope for the best, but nobody makes it a point, or a lot of times nobody will make it a point to keep you updated.
Well, the funny thing is, it's not because of the caseworker. So he moved in with a family member for another short time stay until they could find an adoptive home. And then after that, they again had gotten to this point where it's just like it's too much, especially with a kid who's been an only child for so long through trauma. It's really
Mm,
hard for them to accept other kids in a home while they're healing from that trauma. And so when you go from you're getting all the attention to you're getting a portion of the attention, it really bothers them. And so
yeah.
he ended up moving away, and I didn't know anything at this point. So I was not in contact with him at this point. But he ended up going somewhere. So I'm from the St. Louis area. He's up in the Chicago area now, the opposite side of the state. But it just happened to be a coworker of my dad. So that's how I
What?
found out.
Oh my goodness.
So my dad lives here in St. Louis, but he manages two buildings, one here and one in Chicago. And so he had just been talking to one of the employees up there who was starting to think about foster care and everything. And since I'm a foster parent, he took an interest in asking more questions and following up later. And when they got a call for a placement, he was on the phone with him. They were explaining who the kid was, what his name was, where he was from. He was like, Corey had him in his home. This is so weird. And so, yeah,
Oh my goodness. What a small
just a
world.
weird coincidence. Yeah.
Wow. That is super crazy. I was thinking too about, I'm not sure if you get these emails like from certain agencies or certain organizations that connect foster or adoptive parents with children, but specifically like the second chance adoptions. A lot of times it will say, regardless of the age of the child who they're hoping to have adopted, it'll say this child needs to be the youngest child in the home. And I've seen that
Yeah.
on basically every single one,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which
that happens a
leads us
lot
out.
because their aggression will go towards the smallest person in the house. And if they are the smallest person in the house, that eliminates that issue.
Oh, whoa, I never thought of it that way. Oh my goodness. Wow. Nobody's ever explained it to me that way, or I've never thought about it that way. And wow, my mind is blown. I didn't know that was a thing. Holy cow. Well, cool. Corey, thank you so much for the update. Is there anything else that I forgot or anything else that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. Congratulations on the
Thank you.
adoption. Yeah,
Thanks.
of course. That's awesome. That's a great step. And maybe a year from now, there will be so
Another
many
one.
more updates that
Yeah.
we'll need to do a version 3.
Yeah. Hopefully by
All
then
right.
I'll have a new house, maybe.
You'll
Maybe
probably
not
have
by
like
next year, maybe 2 years.
okay.
And still be fostering. I'll
You'll have
definitely still be fostering.
like a 7-bedroom house. They'll all be
Yeah.
filled, a 15-passenger van.
Right.
All right. Well, cool. A big thanks to Ruben, who is this week's podcast editor. And once again, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a review or some kind words on whatever platform you were listening to Barely Braided. Once again, thank you so much, Corey.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.